One. Okay, Director Raleigh, anybody try to call him yet?
I tried
No.
texting him and I have not heard from him.
Okay,
So
I'd
let
like to
me-
call.
I'll try to call.
Okay, well, we're gonna call to order. We recording Joel?
Yes, we are.
Okay, call to order the water supply meeting for Monday, June 6th, 2022, and the time is 3:01, I believe. Roll call. We got Director Anderson. She's in.
I'm not supposed to be here, am I?
Well, you can be here right now until George Raleigh show up.
Well, and I'm thinking George could be one of the phone-in callers because his
Are we
home
backwards?
phone ends in 914.
Okay, let's check.
Trying to reach him right now.
Okay, I'll just sit here. You can put me in the audience or whatever.
Well, I'm glad you attending the meetings, just in case something happened and you got to step in. You know what's going on up to now.
Yeah, okay, that's the reason.
Hey, that's
Oh,
that's a
okay,
good
I'll
reason.
tell them. All right. George says he's in the audience, but hasn't been let in yet.
And let's trade
Audience.
places.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he just came across though.
It's a 760 number, right, Dave?
No, it's the other one,
The other
the
one?
914.
Talk.
Oh, there it is.
Hi there.
There we
Hi.
go.
This is George.
How you doing, Director Ralph? Okay,
All right,
Joel.
well, I'm on the phone. For some reason, I couldn't get through the normal Zoom process.
Okay, that's fine. Roll call, please.
Committee member Paul,
Here,
committee member Riley,
Here,
Chair Edwards,
Here.
all committee members are present.
Okay, thank you. Next item, any comments from the public?
Yes, so if you would like to make public comment, please do so by raising your hand, or if you're calling in, push *9. Chair Edwards, I do not see anybody with their hands raised, so I'll return this back to the committee.
Okay, next thing I would do is turn it over to the general manager and we can start on the discussion items.
Yes, and I think all of the items today are pretty well described in staff notes, except for the last two, which will just be verbal reports. But I did want to walk us through kind of a lot of things are going on with respect to supply and demand and the potential need for updating. You may recall that we adopted a study in May of 2020 and then amended it to reflect the regional growth forecast in September of 2021. And that remains kind of the district's supply and demand study that has been relied upon for a number of things and contested somewhat frequently. But we've got four things to talk about. The PEC proceedings as they relate to supply and demand, the urban water management plan, just some brief discussion. There was a request to confirm where we stand on Seaside Basin replenishment, and there's kind of two issues there. And then some of the ongoing discussion about the sixth cycle regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA numbers. So the first area, just so everyone who's listening and you as the committee are aware, on June 20th, there will be a submittal of a reply brief by CalAm in the water purchase agreement section of the current application in front of the Public Utilities Commission. And then, oh, Fran, I think I got that wrong. Is it June 20th for the filing for phase 2?
No, the filing for phase 2, CalAm submits in July 20th.
Right.
Right.
All right.
So
Yeah.
we're still on phase 1 with reply briefs that are due June 21.
Right. So there's going to be an overlap. Phase 1 has been all the discussion about the near-term needs for Pure Water Monterey expansion and approval of the proposed amended and restated water purchase agreement. Phase 2 is about long-term supply and demand numbers as they relate to the Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project. So what the presiding officer in our complaint suggested was that those get updated, and the commissioner assigned to this application agreed and created a phase 2. And so that phase 2 testimony starts July 20th. We will respond a month later, which is a little bit why I didn't get too far into the details at this point, because I don't want to preempt the filing of CalAM's testimony. But we will examine what is said in CalAM's direct testimony, and then we'll address it either updating some of our original discussion about changes in assumptions or changes in data sources and so forth. So that's ongoing, and that's where it's highly likely that a lot of what we've either adopted or amended will find its way into testimony with updating. Now, with respect to the Urban Water Management Plan, Director Riley will know we just had a recent discussion with the Water Master.
Can I just interrupt the brief?
Yeah.
Can I go back with a couple of questions on your first point?
Yeah, and that's really, I think, the nature of this today, because the staff notes, you know, I don't need to reread them to you. So.
Okay, well, my question on the first one, which is the phase 2 proceeding, I wanted to go back to the phase 1 part. Isn't the phase 1 part scheduled to be completed sometime later this year, not too far in the future?
Yeah, basically a proposed decision by mid-September, third week of September.
And that's the key issue. That's the key issue in order to proceed with pure water expansion, right?
Correct. And so the process ends around the 20th of this month with the reply briefs going in, and that'll be kind of it. And then the scoping memo indicated that maybe up to 90 days before a proposed decision would be released. Hopefully it's sooner, because it appears, based on everybody's briefing, that there's nobody who opposes the expansion of Pure Water Monterey and a new water purchase agreement.
So the phase 1 and the phase 2 process are separated at this point. One doesn't hinge on the other.
No.
Correct.
And so if phase 1 gets approved, then my second question is regarding to phase 2. And I'm not asking you to reveal anything that you don't need to, but do you see some modifications in the district's report, your report from 2020, was it?
Yeah, I think we will see some modifications. I think we need to beef up how RENA numbers are met. They're not simply additive. They're not on top of everything. We'll talk about that in just a little bit.
Okay.
Some of the assumptions, both in CalAM's earlier testimony and in the Urban Water Management Plan that we addressed, related to Legal Lots Record, you know, it's 20 years old now. And while we updated it in our water supply and demand study, we're continuing to kind of develop new thoughts about it. You know, there was, I believe it's 690 acre feet for commercial growth, which we didn't.
Oh, right, that's in that. Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
and that's
we didn't
later
really
in the
dwell on. So there's some updating, but the unfortunate part that we have right now is we have these RENA numbers, which represent new housing starts. In the previous report, we allowed the regional growth forecast population numbers to embrace the RENA numbers, because they were both from AMBAG. And the assumption was that the 2022 regional growth forecast would incorporate the 5th cycle RENA numbers, because, as you know, population doesn't all move to new housing. It moves to new housing and existing housing. And houses in and of themselves don't really use water. It's people who use water. And so when we had a population forecast as part of that regional growth forecast, we let the population speak for the housing starts. Where we are right now is we don't have an updated population forecast, but we have updated RENA numbers that are significantly higher than they were before. So all the work that we've put in to date has been equating fixture unit counts to water use as if people are in the houses, but it's mostly based on the capacity to use water. You know, assumptions were made about how many single family units, how many 1 bedroom, 1 bath multifamily units, and 2 bedroom, 2 bath multifamily units. And we know there's some 3 bedroom, 3 bath out there that we haven't factored in, but they're in the designs. So
This is a little overlap discussion of some of the other issues.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So
But,
anyway,
you know-
I'm willing to let you continue.
Okay.
Let me just ask this quick question, Dave. You are, it sounds like you're already working on this analysis, and it's going to be your testimony in phase 2, essentially,
Correct.
that's going to be presented. So is there anybody besides you working on, or are you doing all the work?
Oh, I've got water demand divisions. But I request them for certain data. But right now it's, you know, it's primarily me. I don't have that analyst that we talked about. So.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't have the position yet, or do we? Is the position-
No, we haven't developed it. It'll be, but you know, we've offered but haven't filled our financial position. But it'll probably be the 3rd position we look at this year. It'll be later in the year.
All right, so still need to keep this fan.
Go ahead there, Chair. Go
In
ahead.
addition to water demand, I've also suggested that water supply should be engaged, because I think there are 2 additional issues that have not been raised yet. One is all of the new legislation that has come through in the last 3 to 5 years that is pushing housing at an increased rate, which is more than just RENA numbers. For example, the accessory dwelling units, of which we are seeing far more activity, and also the single family allowed lot splits that are now part of the legislation. Also, I think that there needs to be an update and analysis from water supply on the operational capacity of the existing sources of supply, which we have seen repeated assertions by CalAm that certain supplies don't produce what they could. And I think that our experience and knowledge can amplify in those areas, showing that there is more reliability than has been shown, for example, with ASR of excess winter flows, and also the issue on the capacity for Pure Water Monterey to put the water in the ground, which it has been successfully doing. So those are additional areas that I believe we will be addressing.
Could I add one more? The state order to conserve more water by 2025.
Yeah, the 2 targets, 25 and 30. Yeah, and we can talk a little bit more about that. We're pretty much there, so I don't think it's going to have the impact. The first concern was it would impact inflows to both the CSIP project and Pure Water Monterey, as well as our own participation in the reclamation project inside the Del Monte Forest. But when you look at where we stand, depending again on which set of data you use, CalAm's Urban Water Management Plan says we're at 48 gallons per person per day of indoor and outdoor water use. And our perusal of 3 years worth of the reported data places it closer to 57. But in both cases, that's indoor and outdoor. So getting to simply an indoor residential standard as pitched by the Hertzberg bill, I think we're going to be pretty spot on. I think we're already there. So.
What did you say CalAm's number was compared to ours?
Yeah, so their urban water management plan had a number like 48 gallons per capita per day. The last time we ran our analysis on consumption, actually for the population forecast, we went in and we grabbed 3 years worth of monthly data from the reporting that goes to the state, and then divided by the number of residents reported by the company. It's imperfect, but that came out to 57 gallons per capita per day.
Any more questions before I time in there? General Manager, are you going to need any outside help on this?
I don't think so. You know, I think it's,
Okay,
you know, it's basically comparing and contrasting numbers that are available, and then making certain postulations about assumptions or assertions. One of my favorite right now is there's an assumption in the urban water management plan that says, oh, as soon as there's a new water supply, the average use per customer is going to go up by 10%.
There you go.
And, you know, and you've heard me say this over and over, but I'm pretty sure if you open your tap, water comes out right now. So if you were going to use 10% more because you want to, you can. And it'll be a lot more expensive in the future when there's a new water supply online. So it doesn't make any sense from an economist's point of view, but it is a stated assumption. So we're going to just, you know, obviously sit back and wait and see what the first round of testimony gets filed, and then we'll respond to it.
okay, my last question on this one is, Mr. Laredo, can we bring anything to the board to accept or adopt or whatever on this, even though these Reno numbers are not, you know, they out there, but they haven't been brought into to the other agency?
I'd be willing to give some more thought to that, but nothing immediately comes to mind as to board action that's needed.
Okay, because it's supply and demand, and ever since that came out, it became a problem. And some of them sit up there and say the board haven't accepted or adopted or whatever. And I want to make sure that we are covered going through this as much as we can from that angle.
Okay.
So that's the reason that was asked. Okay,
Let me give it some thought, and I'll discuss it with Dave and the chair, vice chair.
okay, please do. Next item, go ahead there, Jim.
And so the second section of this discussion, we've already kind of stepped into. At the Water Master a week ago, there was discussion about some additional modeling work about replenishment water. And a number of those assumptions, we, the district, challenged to no avail because we were concerned about invalid assumptions going in. You know, garbage in equals garbage out. So one of them was treatment of the Pure Water Monterey expansion, or the combined project, the base and expansion. But the other one was what we said was probably a little over reliance on the urban water management plan. And Mr. Bob Jakes gave a impassioned defense of an urban water management plan, saying, oh, it's, you know, there's public hearings and it's vetted and it's done in cooperation with the local water agencies, et cetera, et cetera. And I had to, you know, raise my hand and say, no, it was made public for 7 days, and that short review period culminated in a public hearing where it was adopted. So there was no opportunity to really impact the assumptions or the outcomes of Cal-Am's urban water management plan. So it simply exists as their document, which they've submitted. They submit it every 5 years to the Department of Water Resources. And they've said for this Water Master work that they'll rely on those assumptions or that plan. I'm suspecting that to be consistent, they'll probably rely quite a bit on it for submittal of testimony coming up here in a month. So this graphic that I show on in the second section of the staff note shows, I don't know if you have color or if it came out in black and white, but the blue bars or the taller bars are Cal-Am's future-looking forecast of demand, and the orange bars or the shorter bars ours from our adopted and subsequently amended study. And this is, on average annual water supply needs. This isn't looking at maximum day or peak hour. So obviously there's differences. And so to Fran's point, we're going to spend an awful lot of time describing why there are differences, because this goes to the heart of the issue as to whether or not the desalination project is appropriately sized or needed as soon as 2030, which is a date that they put in a submittal to the water master. So I just wanted to point out the difference, and that when you're doing long-term water supply planning and not the peak analysis, but the average annual analysis, I mentioned the three key drivers. It's, how much do we use today? How much will we need in the future? And how soon will we get there? And I think that the first one and the third one were in very much dispute, and ended up kind of being the crux of the issue in front of the Coastal Commission, because we were significantly different in our starting point. How much do we use today? In the most recent Cal-Am rate case, they changed that. They changed their assumption, and it's markedly different from what they had put in their application for the desal plant. And they came around basically to our position that, all indications are that average usage is in the 9,500 to 10,000 acre feet per year area. Whereas in the desal application, it was closer to 12,500. So we're getting closer in terms of the first driver, but in the third driver, how quickly will we get there? I think whether we're in complete agreement over Pebble Beach build out or economic bounce back or legal lots of record, it's how fast are you going to get there? And it seemed like we never really got the chance in front of the Public Utilities Commission to say, hey, look, it doesn't get built overnight. It takes time. And that's where the regional growth forecast came in as what we used as a proxy for what the growth rate should look like. And that's where it made it seem that Cal-Am was sizing the desal plant as if all this new demand was going to materialize overnight. Pebble Beach was going to build out. All legal lots of record were going to get built. And we know that that doesn't happen. Building departments can't process it. Developers can't entitle property fast enough. It's just, there's a pace at which growth can happen. And what you don't want to do is build for something that's 40 years out and have all the current ratepayers pay for it while they're sitting around waiting for new ratepayers to, show up, move here, and, foot their bill for this capacity. And so it's a real big trade-off. And then, the second item is how much do we need in the future? As I said, you can agree or you can disagree on the fringes. Will Pebble Beach really build out to what their EIR indicated? Will RENA numbers really be maximized in 8 years or 10 years? You can quibble on those facts. And so the key thing for us will be to see, because there is such a difference between our outlook and the Urban Water Management Plan outlook, is what those assumptions are. And that's where we'll spend a lot of time on our testimony.
Director Paul, go ahead.
So none of these analyses take into account needs for drought reserve, do they? Or replenishment of the Seaside Basin?
Right, they don't. And well, they do, they account, and that's the next topic, Seaside Basin. There's two areas there, and they're kind of linked to drought reserve as well. So our, and frankly, Cal-Am's supply needs all included 700 acre feet per year of what we call in lieu recharge, non-pumping of the Seaside Basin right. So instead of what Cal-Am is now legally entitled to pump, which is 1,474 acre feet, both of our analyses reduce that to 774 acre feet, assuming 700 acre feet would be left in the basin for 25 years. What's interesting, of course, is that means in the 26th year, it comes back. And that's like found water at that point. Certainly climate change and natural rainfall will impact how well in lieu recharge works, because it's not adding water, it's just not subtracting water. And so if it doesn't rain, it's not like you're replenishing what you're not pumping.
Mhm.
So, that'll be kind of followed. But then there's this other area of discussion called protective water levels. And there's some discussion in the staff note about protective water levels on the Seaside Basin. But the important takeaway there is, and Fran alluded to this, we've got certain detractors who say, well, the world has changed, climate has changed. ASR is not going to produce on average what you predict it's going to produce. Now, the hydrology seems to imply that it will, the historical hydrology, and then some. And we've got studies that show, over a historical period, what it would look like. And you've got a lot of climate people saying you're going to get more intense rains and more intense dry periods, but it is not clear, at least on the Central Coast, that you're not going to get the same amount of rain. It may just happen in bigger bursts. So the reason that point's important is ASR can sustainably support 1,300 acre feet per year on average, given the hydrologic cycle. But if you start in a drought, we've only got 1,300 acre feet saved right now. And so if you go through 4 or 5 years with no new water, you might end up depleting that. And so you don't have the built up reservoir. But then you turn your attention to Pure Water Monterey expansion. It has more capacity than there will be demand. So, we've used the AMBAG growth forecast, it's about 39 acre feet per year. But if you're producing 2,250, and even if you take out the 700 for in lieu recharge in the Seaside Basin, you've still got 1,450. 1,550 acre feet of Pure Water Monterey expansion for 39 acre feet of growth. So even if you assume the growth doubled, so it's 78 acre feet, you've still got, over 1,300 acre feet of excess water. So there's two things that can be done with that. One is you put it in the ground as a drought reserve for kind of offsetting climate impacts on ASR, or if it rains, you use ASR and build its drought reserve up, and you use Pure Water Monterey water as protective levels, protective groundwater elevations. Either way, there's excess water in the early years of any of these because your demand doesn't all happen overnight. It takes time to grow into place. And so the water that we're looking at coming in, and this is again a point of disagreement between us and Cal-Am, but it goes to the heart of how big of a desal plant do you need, or do you need one at all? Because there's a lot of extra water sitting in Pure Water Monterey expansion that can go somewhere. And so that's where we would be building up drought reserve.
And Cal-Am is gonna, under the water purchase agreement, Cal-Am buys all of it.
That is correct.
I mean, or almost all of it.
Yeah. And there's been some discussion as to whether that was the smartest move on their part, given how revenue is recognized. Water in the ground or water behind a dam is an asset. When you sell it, it's a revenue, and there's a little bit of different treatment to it. It worked really well for the first water purchase agreement because it was not all the water that was needed. So they could make a blanket statement that, yeah, we'll take all 3,500 acre feet. In this case, when we negotiated, they said, yes, we would like all additional expansion water. And we questioned the same thing, which is, well, if you can't sell it all to a customer, what are you going to do with it? And it was these concepts of, building up reserves and having a factor of safety. It protects you for having to go to the river on a peak hot day when all you're trying to do is stay off the river in the summer, those kind of things.
Well, Dave, once you put water in protected levels, can you take it out of protected levels and use it for growth? That's the point I see them going is that 1,500 is for protected levels. Now we need additional water for growth.
Right.
How do we handle that?
Yeah. So what we did in the analysis to this committee in March of 2021, it's mentioned in here, is we actually only put the excess away, and then each year your excess is smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller because now your demand is growing. And so eventually your demand catches up with the total capacity of the expansion. So it's like a triangle, right? And so early on, you got a piece of the triangle that represents excess and it runs to zero because now your demand is caught up to the size of your expansion. So the question then becomes, where is that? What year in the future is that? But what our analysis showed is with the AMBAG growth forecast, which, we're not 100% sure we're going to continue to rely on, but that you would get almost all the water they were talking about for protective water levels in 30 years. And then when you consider that Pure Water Monterey expansion and Pure Water Monterey base case has an operating reserve that is meant not to be tapped, it actually lines up pretty well with the desired protective water levels as currently modeled. And so, replenishment water is going to get remodeled again with a different set of assumptions. So we'll have to see what those results show. I think one of the important things to remember in any of this discussion about protecting the Seaside Basin with protective water levels, no matter where it came from, whether it comes from a desalination plant or Pure Water Monterey expansion, is the injection capacity that's been designed is for consumers. It's for, CalAM's use. Now, that being said, if you have excess water, you can put it in the ground using those facilities. But they really the water master hasn't spent any time designing extra injection capacity. If the expansion didn't go forward, there is no extra expansion or injection capacity. But if they wanted to buy desal water to inject, they would have to design additional injection capacity. And then there's better places to inject it. The studies have shown that if you inject it on the coast, you need less protective water levels than if you inject all the way up by General Jim Moore Boulevard. Well, if you're going to inject near the coast, you got to have pipelines and new injection sites. And so there's not an infrastructure plan in place. So right now, all the emphasis is just on identifying where water might come from. And there's also no finance plan in place as to, how much would it cost and who's going to pay for it. So, but there is a lot of discussion about protective water levels, primarily because there's a cadre of people on the water master who see that this is a way to support a desal plant as a necessary means to get extra water into the system. But it's not a fully baked plan at this point.
Someone would have to pay to, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead, Director. Go ahead.
Well, who would pay to inject that desal water into for protective water levels?
that's the question that has no answer. And the discussion has been, and it's kind of started and stopped, but it's, could the water master buy water? Well, the water master isn't a public agency. It doesn't have revenue raising capability except through agreements with its parties, with its members. If it would be done solely on behalf of protecting the water source for Cal-Am, then you might say, okay, Cal-Am customers should pay for the costs. But there's several producers, including Seaside Municipal and private producers, producers who've sold some of their water so that Montage could get water sooner to build a building and so forth. If they benefit from the protected water levels, then how would they participate? And then we have kind of a intertemporal or generational issue where the deficit and the problem was created previously during times where none of that water could get to the Carmel Valley residents. You know, it wasn't until the Monterey Pipeline and a couple new pump stations came online here in the last few years. So, you know, a consortium of Carmel Valley residents could say, we shouldn't participate in this. We didn't create this problem. So a funding plan has not been contemplated.
Okay,
Through the chair, I have a couple questions.
go ahead.
Yeah, I think one other aspect of this dilemma with the protected water level is there's the leakage from the higher level water, you know, the groundwater levels in the Seaside Basin is at a higher elevation than the Corral de Terra or the Monterey Subbasin. So we lose water from the basin, the Seaside Basin, toward the Monterey Subbasin, the Corral de Terra, and then they lose water because they're at a higher elevation than the actual lowest problem. I mean, the lowest level elevation level, or the deepest depression of water and groundwater levels, is in the Salinas Basin. So we've got a reverse problem of if we're going to create protective levels. I'm concerned that you need to fix the problem with the Salinas overdraft in order to address the Monterey Subbasin overdraft. And then you have to address that before you address the Seaside Basin. So we've got a reverse schedule of sequential efforts, sequential projects that need to start at the Salinas level and move toward the Monterey Subbasin, Corral de Terra, and then move toward the Seaside Basin. It's really an awkward, but that's the nature of the groundwater flow pattern that they've discovered. I mean, that they know about anyway. I think that's a dilemma. I don't know if you want to add any more to that, Dave, or verify, did I say it right?
No, you said it right. And then the only other thing is right now there's a hydraulic divide between the Seaside Basin and Marina Coast's wells. And so, you know, it's kind of like where CSUMB is, creates a barrier, a hydraulic barrier. But with the annexation of Marina Coast land, you know, they could sink a well. They've got the rights to sink wells. They control, you know, who gets to sink wells, not in the adjudicated basin area, but, you know, if they wanted to go right up to the edge, they could. And the more we begin to address the Seaside Basin's need for replenishment, that saucer fills up with water. And so the fuller the Seaside Basin is, the more it's also going to want to leak towards CSUMB and towards Marina. And so it would be protecting against seawater intrusion to the west, but the leakage to the north could increase as well. So what Director Riley's referred to is a known problem where there's already leakage to the Corral de Tierra area.
Okay, Mr. Laredo,
Yes, sir.
that 700 acre feet, that's in the adjudication. If that was going to be changed, do it have to go through the court system to change it? And where do we stand on, what our position on that will be if we had to, we saying one thing, they saying another thing. So could they just say that 700 acre feet is more like 1,400 or 2,100 acre feet is needed now? Who would be able to make that change?
I believe that would have to go back to the court. And certainly the Water Master Board would be given fair weight by the judge, but that will not be the only decision, the only factor to be based upon for that decision.
Yeah,
Now,
and I don't think the 700 is hardwired by the adjudication. It was a negotiated agreement, which could change just simply because with each passing year, if Cal-Am's deficit has increased, then you'd want to increase that number.
But any dispute would go back to the judge.
Yeah.
Okay, and as the managers of the basin, how much say do we have? Or we might as well sit on the sideline and let it happen. How much say do we have? Can we go in there and say, no, you don't need that? The general manager feel that, hey, the district feel that 1,500 acre feet is there. We don't have to increase it to 21 or whatever. I'm trying to get us in a fight.
Well, under that scenario, there'd be a disagreement, and the disagreement, I believe, would have to go back to the judge.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and what they did last time, in the early 2000s, the judge said, hey, little district, we appreciate all your concerns, but this is an adjudication between parties identified here, and here. But I tell you what, we'll make sure in our decision that your rights are not impugned and you can participate as a member, but they didn't give any great credence to our position at the time, nor did they turn over full management of the problem to us. So.
Okay, I just want to know because it's going to come up.
Yeah.
We're going to have to be able to make a position. And I feel that, well, we should make a position. And in fact, make it better than what we got now. Just sitting on the sidelines since we're looking at managing the basin. Okay, what's next? Anyone more questions?
Yeah, so
I have a couple.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to back up. I'm sorry. I want to back up on one question and then add another.
And Mr. Chairman, we also need to go out to the public on this.
Okay, thank you.
May I proceed?
Go ahead, Director.
Oh, okay. I'm going to go back I'm just kind of looking at my notes as everybody's talking and so on, but I've got a note here. I'm going back to the Cal-Am's Urban Water Management Plan briefly. My understanding is that Cal-Am issued a 60-day notice that this plan was coming or something.
Yeah.
And I just want to pin down what I think was my question is, when if that's correct, I mean, I understand that's what they did, but if they did, was the draft report available 60 days earlier, or was it only available 7 days before the public hearing?
7.
Set up? Okay, so the report itself, even though they may announce that this is coming, the report itself wasn't available until 7 days before. Okay, that's a pretty tight schedule. I just saw my note again. I wanted to confirm that. The other thing is when the Pure Water Monterey expansion agreement with Cal-Am was executed, and Cal-Am agreed to purchase, the full amount, and that, and then there was question about, do you really want to? I'm wondering if they believed their supply numbers were more accurate than the district supply numbers. Therefore, they were buying on the expectation on futures. It was a futures trade for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that for all of the public consumption, Cal-Am will make the case that Pure Water Monterey expansion is nice, but it's not enough. And therefore, it's time to act on desal. And what makes that work is that their demand assumptions are better than our demand assumptions. That now we need to talk about protected water levels, those kinds of things.
Well, and just to catch the committee up on at least the discussion I had on the water management, the water master meeting just a few days ago, there was question about, I questioned a report, and it's one of the assumptions that were made, and I know, Dave, you've been challenging the assumptions in your mind and to be dealt with in the future, but one of the assumptions, just so Melvin and Karen know, and whoever else is on the call, one of the assumptions that was made is that Cal-Am will have a desal in operation in 2030. And I was raising questions about how can you make, what's the evidence you have that's likely to happen? And some of the response I got was, we're basing this on realism. We're basing this on realistic facts. And I said, you call that a realistic fact? And without any adequate response to my question, I think there's some real weakness in Cal-Am's projections, if that's what, the Water Master's projections, if that's one of the assumptions that's in the report. And one of the assumptions that come from Cal-Am's urban water management plan, because they also say in that plan, we expect to have a desal in operation in 2030. I don't see any evidence that that's happening. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you, Director Riley. I heard the same thing because I was listening on that meeting. So that brings me back to another one for the general manager. Should we hire, they're going to do a study of the Seaside Basin again in that meeting. Should we look at some outside, or can we do it within the district to look at and come up with something that we could use if we have to go to court on that to back you up on that 1,500?
Yep. So, and we've talked about it because, and Director Riley will remember this, when one of their assumptions was that the combined project, Pure Water Monterey project with the expansion, is only going to produce the minimum allotment of 4,600 acre feet per year. And our point, and we raised our hand and said, well, if we did that, we'd be in default. It'd be a breach, and there are financial penalties. So obviously, we're not going to run it that way. We're going to run it to produce the full 5,750 per year that would come out of the combined project. And they said, well, we're just trying to bookend. And so this would be a conservative bookend. And, that way we'll have some assumptions that allow us some room. Internally, we've already talked about the potential need for going to an outside consultant to produce a scenario based on how more realistically we think the assumptions should be. We could not do that in-house. And we're going to kind of wait and see what happens and react to it. But it might be one of those things where we can separately pay for a scenario of the same model with the same modeler, or go out and get a third party. So that's a wait and see. But
well, here I go. Don't wait too long, because these numbers are going to be used at the PUC coming up. I do believe it, because they got to justify something. They got to justify that desal. And when is the best time to bring it up? I don't know how long it's going to take the water master to get their study, but be prepared. They're going to be using those numbers. So let's don't sit on the sideline and wait and worry about pissing them off. Excuse my language, directors and staff. But don't sit on the sidelines and wait for that, and then we take action. So that's fine. Okay, Joel, let's open up. Any other directors, staff comments? If not, Joel, please open up to the public.
well, we still have one more subtopic, and then we'll be done with this whole item.
Okay, go ahead.
So the RENA numbers. So earlier, Fran Farina spoke to ADUs and all the changes in legislation to make splitting into into tiny lots, like they're looking at doing in Pacific Grove and elsewhere. In our current view, is all of these things are just trying to facilitate the construction of housing, including affordable housing. And the RHNA numbers are the target for housing. So our view is you're not going to achieve your RHNA numbers unless you've got a city council that's going to promote it, a city council that's going to zone for it, and you've got some of these permissive laws like allowing ADUs and lower impact fees and so forth. So we don't think that the easing of the ADU language or the promotion of housing-oriented language is going to double the housing stock from the RHNA number. It's just going to enable you to achieve your RHNA number, even though we're highly skeptical that anyone is going to be able to achieve the RHNA number. So our starting point is, good luck. You're not going to make your RHNA number, but if you did, how much water would it take? And that's where, as we reported to the Water Demand Committee and as noted in the table in the staff note, it's about 750 acre feet. Now there's 164 housing units that are permitted in Carmel Valley. There's actually 190, but 26 of them were in the old airport that's now taken over by Griggs Nursery. So those are pretty unlikely. So we looked at those and, we said, okay, they're not all going to happen at the same time. And Carmel Valley Village's number of units, we're still waiting on that. But we said, sure, maybe 10 to 15 acre feet for the unincorporated county. So you're really talking 265, maybe even 270 acre feet. I'm sorry, 765, 770, whatever. But what we realized is this is not additive. This is not new shocking water on top of everything else we've talked about. This is specifically what legal lots of record was for. These are lots from subdivision, lots that are underutilized, vacant lots, vacant parcels, vacant lots on improved parcels, could include remodels, and the amount of water that was set aside for remodels could easily have included a bunch of ADUs. The water that was set aside for the commercial sector in the study, these are 20-year-old numbers, but it was 1,181 acre feet in CalAM's forecast. The districts reduced that by an average of about 242 acre feet. So it's still a lot of water in our demand forecast. And the fact of the matter is, probably a good 2/3 or 3/4 of the water that would be needed to meet the RHNA numbers is already in everybody's forecast. So we shouldn't be as afraid of these RHNA numbers as everyone lets on. It's not a huge driver, because where do you build housing? On legal lots of record. And so we've got a lot of water stuck in there for the legal lots of record. And, we will spend quite a bit of time, I believe, on improving that argument, because I think it's hard for people to understand that it's not like, oh, now we have to find additional water for all of this new housing because we didn't think about it, or because the 6th cycle quadrupled what the 5th cycle had in it, and so forth. And that kind of summarizes all of the subcategories of the supply and demand forecast, and we can go out to the public.
Okay, go ahead, Director.
Just quickly, Dave. What you're saying is the 750, which are in the RHNA, I mean, the RHNA numbers drive the water requirement number, and that water requirement number, much of it is already in calculations that you've made in for the future based on legal lots of record existence. Yep. That have the potential for housing, and therefore you set some water, aside some allocation of water for those legal lots of record. So I think that's what you're saying is, don't be so frightened here. there is a challenge in front of everybody, which is getting housing. But that's a city issue, not a district issue.
That's right. That's correct.
City and county issue, yeah.
Well,
All right.
well, a quick comment on that. We got involved in it when we started looking for water for housing. I want to remind everybody. So that's why we in it. Now we can't say, well, it's up to the cities and the county to get it. We stepped into this one a couple of years ago. So that's on the comment on that. Director Paul, do you have any comments?
Well, I agree with what you said. I think it's really a matter of how we talk about it. I mean, we all know that our agency is not responsible for the land use planning and the permitting of the housing and all that, but we also want to help remove obstacles concerning water supply. So, I mean, it's just, I mean, we all know this, it's just a matter of how we talk about it. I don't want to say things that sound like it's not our problem, because
Yeah.
it's a regional problem for everybody that we want to help solve in the ways that we can.
Okay. Joel, let's open it up to the public.
Yes, so if you would like to make public comment on this matter, please raise your hand, or if you're calling in, push star 9. And Chair Edwards, I see no raised hands.
Okay, just close comments from me. If any other board members doesn't have any. Hey, we can't sit on our hands on this. You know, you gave us the facts, and one of our problems is getting out to the public that we are looking at these things and we are going to be accused of this, or they're going to say it's enough water for this. We shouldn't be sitting on our hands and wait till it gets up to the CPU level where we got to argue about it or question or try to stop it. So we need to just get ahead of these things. I know it sounds like I'm crying wolf, but I know what's going to go on, and we just need to get up, you know, public relations, so they can't say the district is playing catch up when we know about this. So anything else on that? If not any, what's the next item there?
One more real quickly through the chair.
Go ahead.
And I think the discussions we normally have is not just the water supply or water demand numbers. It's how do we work with the other agencies to kind of, you know, understand the problem and approach it. And I think we've been pretty good about that. So it's not just water, it's how do you work with other agencies as well. I believe either. Anyway, that's what I believe we ought to be doing, and I think we are doing it. So
Well, I believe we're doing it, but I look at your Seaside Basin Committee meeting that day, then nobody want to show up. Then nobody want to show up to take the vote on that one. So if I stay out of it, I don't have to vote on it. I may disagree with it, but I don't have to vote on it. But I looked at your Seaside Basin Committee when the 6 of you just showed up and you got outvoted 4-2.
Yep.
All right. What's the next item?
Next item is an update on Pure Water Monterey performance to date. The water purchase agreement's on a fiscal year basis. All the planning we do for water is on a water year basis. And many of the permits are on a calendar year basis. So it's like juggling, but focusing on performance under the water purchase agreement, we have, for the current fiscal year, injected a total of, well, you saw it in the staff note, just over 3,400 acre feet. 166 of that went to the operating reserve, leaving 3,242 of company water delivered. That's through the end of May. We've been on track to meet our 3,500 performance guarantee with approximately 2.8 million gallons per day required. We started off June at over 3 MGD, but over the weekend, there was a little power outage, both in Seaside and up at the plant. I don't know if you were aware of it or if you guys saw the flashing stoplights, but as a result, on Saturday and Sunday for about 24 hours, injection rates dropped significantly to just over 1 MGD. That being said, you know, was in communication with Monterey One Water this morning, and they brought a team out early, and I think we'll get back on track. So hopefully somewhere in the in a perfect world, somewhere during the third week of June, we'll do a little press release on the achievement of 3,500 delivered to the company without having to, revise the operating reserve numbers. That's our preference. If there was another outage or another problem, then we could reduce the deliveries to the operating reserve and still meet our 3,500. So that's pretty much it. I hate to make a guarantee, but it's pretty much a guarantee, absent some act of God. So right on track for achieving everything that we said we would achieve. And water quality is good. We're going to talk about the ASR 1 well later in this agenda. But the project is performing pretty much as expected.
Wonderful.
Yeah, great.
Jim, backup power supply out there. I thought we were going to get involved in that a little bit, but I haven't heard too much on it. But
Yeah,
how is that, could you find out how is that going with those agencies out there for the backup power supply?
Yeah, originally it was going to be us and Monterey One Water working on a medium voltage transformer system to buy power from the waste management agency. But now both the waste management agency and Monterey One Water are looking at actually building a microgrid that would have that capability. And that's a much bigger project, but it would meet the needs of both of their agencies out there in North Marina. So I think they'll be putting together some plans and going out to bid on that later this year. But yeah, our ASR facilities, the injection facilities, the landfill and Monterey One Water are all on the edge of the PG&E system. And it's not been the best service. I mean, we had to wait quite a while to get the connection for ASR wells 3 and 4. And then, only partially joking and maybe not joking at all, I think early on PG&E said, hey, please don't run all 4 of these at the same time, until improvements could be made to their distribution system. And same thing, up at Monterey One Water, they're susceptible to power outages. So.
Okay.
That's all I have on that one.
Okay, Joel, let's take that out to the public, find out if we have any more comments.
All right, so if you would like to make public comment on item number 2, please raise your hand. Or if you're calling in, push *9. Chair Edwards, I see no raised hands.
All right, what's the next item, Jim?
Well, it looks like Maureen is out at the site at great backdrops. Maureen's actually working remotely because there may have been a COVID exposure. She does not express it, as I understand, but our policy is that if you've had an exposure, you stay away from our office for 5 days to see if you're gonna be okay. So we miss you, Maureen, but glad you can participate remotely. And we hope you don't catch it because, Kyle, it can linger.
I'm lucky enough to be of the age where I can be double boosted.
Yeah. So I included in the packet a staff note with 5 bullet points on expansion. Right now, really, I can tell you, all we're waiting on is a decision by the PUC. And with that decision, and assuming all 3 parties sign the amended and restated agreement, then we can award a contract. So, everything that we need to do now, schedule-wise, is dependent on, or the start of the schedule is dependent on the PUC decision. We have a WIFIA and the EPA funding program term sheet in hand. There will be, obviously time to actually effectuate that financing, but it means we don't have to go out to the street, Wall Street and do a tax exempt financing or anything, which will be more convenient and probably cheaper. And then finally, the actual execution and schedule, we'll have to just really follow what's going on with supply chain issues because, we put the schedule together over a year ago and, a lot has happened. A lot's happened with supply chain delays and, so we're following that very closely as well. But, in general, it's kind of queued up, ready to go if we get the green light from the Public Utilities Commission.
Okay, any questions on that?
So about how long would it take after let's say, the PUC approves the agreement, it's executed, and then how much longer would it take to finish arranging the financing?
Yeah, so the financing, it all depends on whether the PUC uses their 90 days or not. If they give us a proposed decision sooner, I'm not sure the EPA can jump faster, but the original schedule or the most recent schedule that we've shared with you is about 19 or 20 months from the PUC approval. What I think we're going to see now is long lead time items and supply chain issues is going to end up dragging that out. So in my mind, I'd kind of give it 24 months, 26 months, soup to nuts.
Okay, but the financing piece is, as I understand your memo, mostly, basically everything that can be put in place at this juncture has been done, and then.
Yeah,
But
but even like on the base project, we had the state revolving fund loan, and we needed both an agreement and then some amendments to the agreement.
Mhm.
And so we started spending money knowing that we were going to get it, but it took a while to get it. And so in that particular case, Monterey One Water secured a line of credit, and we were playing the float a little bit, and we may have to do the same thing here.
Okay. Glad you're on top of that.
Okay, any other questions? Joel, ask the public if you have any comments on that one.
Right. If you have any comment for item number 3, please raise your hand. And if you're calling in, push *9. Chair Edwards, I see no raised hand, so I'll return this back to the committee.
Okay, thank you. Number 4 there, Jim.
Yeah, this will be very brief. Hang on, I'm just jotting something down. ASR well number 1, we had a 3-party meet and confer on May 27th. Mr. Laredo and myself attended for the district. Monterey One was represented by their GM and their outside counsel. And Cal-Am was represented by 2 professionals and an in-house counsel and an outside counsel. I can't remember if it's the Stinger missile or the other missile, but I was the Stinger missile, I guess. I came in a little hot.
But good for you.
Yeah, because it made everyone else feel real comfortable to speak their mind. So I wasn't the one who used the full phrase for which the initials B and S stand for. And I was not one to call somebody out as repeating lies. So, but the rest will kind of stay with us. There's attorney-client privilege. There's been some follow-up with some bullet-pointed items that there's some interest in further discussion on. We're currently, we received a June 2nd, so I guess last Thursday, email to have another meet and confer. One of the challenges is that Monterey One Water is party to the water purchase agreement, and the water master is not, but the water master is party to the storage and recovery agreement, but Monterey One Water is not. And so some of, well, oh, and yes, the water master was represented in that meet and confer meeting as well. So it was 4 parties. So we're talking about 2 separate agreements, and we're meeting because there's a dispute, but the fundamental piece of this is we don't believe we're in breach of either agreement, yet we're meeting and conferring. And so we've suggested a few dates we can meet and confer again, and we will continue to do so. And I'll let Mr. Laredo decide whether there's something reportable that he wants a closed session for, probably after our next meeting.
Right. I haven't heard anything yet that we have a decision point for a closed session. At the moment, we're trying to figure out another date for discussion. There's some back and forth as to what the dates are that are available. And one of the conditions of the discussion so far is that it's all under confidentiality understandings, because these are settlement discussions. So that doesn't mean we can't go back to the board in closed session, but we certainly cannot talk about this in open session here.
But you can't say that you met and confer.
We did meet, yes, and we did not resolve it to the point. And David Cook, their lead, Cal-Am's lead attorney, did say that there were a number of points for information gathering that needed to be reported back to the larger group, and that there was value in continuing the discussion. That where we are in disagreement as to, are we on a timeline that has a mandatory end date? Cal-Am perceives that there is a mandatory end date, which is 120 days from the date of the original statement of dispute. We point out that that's an artificial date. As long as we're making progress in terms of discussing alternatives, the parties can modify that date to an alternate time that is appropriate. And that certainly is Monterey One Water's perspective. That's our perspective. And we're not yet of like mind as to when decisions now need to be made. And where are we going? There is a mediation as a concept that might come out of this, but we're not there yet.
Well, only thing I want you to do, as Director Edwards would probably say, transparency, and just tell the public that we had a meet and confer. You don't have to go in depth on it, but we are out there talking about ASR 1, and it's not being kept from the public.
That's true. And in addition, we have identified data points, information that is needed to be adduced and shared amongst all of us. So
as long as they know all that, I feel comfortable, because they're trying to put out that we're trying to keep them in silence on it. They don't know nothing on us. So we want to keep the public involved.
Okay.
But Dave, one more question on that 1.7 million we put in the budget for a well. Do that have anything to do with this, what we're talking about, or is that another issue?
No, it would, and it was kind of our offer to be part of the solution. There's a lot of work that's being done on physical solutions here, other than restarting ASR well number 3, which would require modifying the Title 22 amended engineers report. It would take a lot of time to review at the State Division of Drinking Water. We'd be trying to establish a permitting regime where injection limits are defined for certain wells, and there have to be additional modeling done to demonstrate travel times and so forth. So that one request, because that really was the request of the company and their outside counsel, is fraught with time delay, engineering work, expense. But at the same time, there's some other physical solutions, like interconnecting the Peralta well with the Monterey pipeline so that it could be leveraged to capture pure water Monterey water. That's been completed. Looking at ASR well number 4 for some treatment to ensure its water quality, that's being examined. That budgeted item, the first concept was doing something jointly with the city of Seaside on property they already own to develop a well that they likely will need for their municipal system and for the campus town development, but use it for an interim period of 2 to 3 years to serve as a replacement for ASR. You know, I think that one has time and the number of parties that would have to negotiate it. It doesn't appear to be the favorite. The company is looking at some other locations where they might be able to quickly drill an extraction well. But that kind of thing. And then there's some other ideas that we didn't even talk about, which we'll bring up at our next meet and confer. But it all depends on what the issue is. If it's wet water production capacity, that's solving one problem, but alternate sources of water can also solve part of the problem. And so we've got 2 ideas on that we'll come up with. But, you know, so these physical solutions have been worked on. It's just that one regulatory solution of turning ASR well number 1 back on, which, you know, we're the owner. We don't really want to do so. We don't want to jeopardize. The trade-off is, you know, we have a water supply problem here on the peninsula. So why would we want to decrease supply just to improve production capacity? And if there's an alternative way to do so, we should be looking at the alternative way to do so.
Well, quickly for me, just on this item, Mr. Laredo, maybe you can help me. We own ASR 1. I was on the district when we built ASR 1. We was going to sell ASR 1 one time to Cal Lam. It seemed like it didn't happen before I got off the board. Now, how come we cannot own any wells that we drill? I know that one that we did for Monterey One Water, they got that facility in there, and we sort of like build a well for them. This next well or any well we build, how come we can't own that well?
We can own it. We can own it.
Yeah, we own ASR 1 and 2, but we have a joint operating agreement which blurs the lines as to who controls the lock on the door kind of thing. I think I would tell you we control the lock on the door right now. And so it's going to take quite a bit to free that up. You know, there's no water quality issue. This has been kind of put out there in the press as there's a water quality problem. The water quality requirement at the delivery point, which are any of the injection wells, is fine. It's great. It's not a water quality problem. It's a travel time problem where you don't want to jeopardize public health in the event that there was a water quality problem. So, you know, the whole idea of an environmental buffer or a travel time, the physical standpoint is that it's going to remove any viruses or any pathogens that slip through if it's long enough. And then if something bad does happen to your injected water, there's enough time to find out about it and then pull all that water out and treat it, wellhead treat it and put it back in the ground clean, you know, that kind of thing.
The key is who owns the facility, who owns and controls the water rights, and what are the conditions upon which the sale is made to Cal Lam, because Cal Lam does have the monopoly on providing water for its customers. So it's those 3 aspects of that.
I understand that. I just hate for us when we're talking about drilling wells. Well, we talked about, I think Director Rowley brought that point up the last time we discussed it. And we end up saying that, well, we might have to, you know, give it to another public agency. I want to keep those assets as we get them.
Yeah,
Drill them to help them, but let's keep them.
Yeah, when we had the budget discussion, we clearly did say, you know, we'd throw in a bunch of money, jointly develop the well, and then turn over ownership. But
yes,
but you know, a lot of those decisions have been made in the past based on, well, whose land is it on, or who's doing what. You know, even the reclamation project in the 90s, the only piece of it that we own, you know, we raised the money, $34 million. And the only piece of it that we own is the water when it's in the pipes. But if somebody else owns the pipes, somebody else owns the tank, somebody else owns the facility that manufactures the water. And so there's been, you know, quite a bit of that through time. The Peralta well was one where we could afford to develop it. We did the science and we did the test well, but we couldn't afford to build the permanent well because we didn't have a robust revenue source at the time. Different decisions got made for different reasons that, you know, I think with Pure Water Monterey, the deal we made was our job is to deliver a new supply of water. If we don't own it, the facility, but we can guarantee that it's producing, then why should we care about ownership? So we spent a lot of money that we'll never get back. I think the total now is up around 16 million with deep injection well number 4. We've gotten some back. We got about 4 million back from the state, and I think we're going to get 1.5 million from the federal grant. But yeah, we don't
Okay,
own a lot of the things we paid for.
I'm fine with that, but as long as we can explain it, if it comes to keeping assets, let's try to keep them. And if we're trying to help the community, we're saying we're trying to help them with their money. And that's why we're doing this. So that's on it. I just wanted to make it clear on that. Any other directors have any comments on that?
Yeah,
Or-
I have one quick one through the chair.
Go ahead.
I just hope that we, and it seems like we have been doing this anyway, but this is a reminder, keep the big picture in mind. It's the supply, it's the safety and guarantee around the supply, and it's the ability to continue to function within the supply volumes that we have to deal with. And just because Cal-Am has an idea about something, I don't think they have a great track record of being able to deliver on what they want to say they want to deliver on anyway. And I just hope every alternative, I know you're on the right track, and I just support that. I just think the big picture here has got to prevail. And
Good.
I support what you're doing.
Any comments, Director Paul, before we ask for the public comment on that item?
No, I have nothing to add right now. Thank you,
All
Chair
right,
Edwards.
thank you. Joel, check with the public.
Yes, if you would like to make public comment on this matter, please raise your hand. Chair Edwards, I see no raised hand, so I'll return this back to the committee.
Thank you. Item 5, GM.
Yep. So on May 12th, the city manager of Monterey and myself had a call with several representatives of the State Housing and Community Development Department to kind of pitch our case as to what's going on and where we could use some help. That was followed up by some additional questions by the HCD staff about a week, maybe 9 days later, which I helped answer a few things. And then had a follow-up call with Hans Uslar May 20th. And our consensus was that because State Senator John Laird was still kind of working on this project internally, and he has some solid relationships with State Water Board, that we would defer to him for a few weeks and see if anything could be developed that way. So that's where we're at right now, just kind of laying a little bit lower than we had been in the past.
Okay. Just one comment from me. Have we sent the official letter to Monterey on that item? Or are we waiting for something, or should
To
we?
the city of Monterey? Yeah, on
Yes.
that one, they requested, let's see. Yeah, they requested on March 17th that we, let's
We pass a resolution.
Yeah, pass a resolution requesting that we immediately lift the cease and desist order, correct. And I think we've agreed that that's not how we feel right now. I know at this committee's last meeting, I laid out for you what it takes both under the CDO and under the CPUC moratorium, what it takes to lift those. And we're not there. We could certainly revisit the idea of a resolution, but I don't think that's the way it's going to go. I think the way it has to go is, and we've suggested this, is a single page interpretive letter that would exempt affordable housing from the requirements of condition 2, either both the moratorium on new connections as well as the no increase in use at existing service connections, or at a minimum, the no increase in use at existing service connections. And that is possible. And that would just be the state water board saying, we will not enforce for purposes of affordable housing up to a limit. We've talked about 75 acre feet, 50 acre feet, 25 acre feet, whatever we can get. So, I wouldn't recommend a resolution. And we have, I think actually in the comments I gave to Hans on May 24th, I think we once again described that, a single interpretive letter is all we need. And then you can rely.
Well, I'll leave that up to the chair and vice chair and you, but I think the board needs to get something out there to Monterey, just to say, we heard you. Even though we have a board member from that city on our board, we heard you and this is what we came up with. But just answer with that one letter or whatever.
Yeah.
Ask them for what you just said or whatever. So just showing the public and all the other cities that we will answer a letter and a request, even though it may not go our way and we wish it would.
Well, and I have on my to-do list, there was another request in their letter, which was a letter from us stating our position about if water would be available by 2023. And I think Chair Paul just sent a letter to AMBAG satisfying a similar request. And I was going to pull kind of the same information from that, as well as a summary of our enumeration of how much water might be needed for the RENA numbers. That was a separate request in the same March letter by the city. So that's on my list of to-dos to answer that part. I just don't think a resolution is calling for the lifting of the CDO would carry any weight, and because we understand what the CDO says, it would.
Yeah, as I recall, there was I think consensus with staff and the board that a resolution was at this time was not going to be helpful, but and that we were trying different approaches which we're pursuing, but I appreciate the reminder, Director Edwards, to respond in writing somehow to the city's letter. So I guess we should do that.
The reason why the transparency, and it shows the rest of the community that we are looking at these things. So any letters that we can make public and approve public is well needed from me. I appreciate that. Just we can't do what you like, but here it is, and we telling the community we stand on top of these items.
Yeah, a good point. Good point. We should explain what we are doing.
Any letters, AMBAG or whoever, that we are standing on top of it, and with me, that's telling them, and we're standing on top of it.
Yeah.
Director Raleigh, any comments?
Not on that topic, no.
Okay, Joel, you can take that out to the public.
Yes, so if you would like to make public comment on item number 5, please raise your hand. Edwards? I see no raised hands.
Okay, any other items? We had suggestion items to be placed on future agendas.
I have two comments on that
Go ahead.
item. First of all, on the Board of Supervisors agenda tomorrow is a proposal to modify the County Ordinance 1072, which is a requirement that DSAL have public ownership, requires public ownership of DSAL. It's on the docket tomorrow for a change to allow private participation, private corporate participation in those projects. This is just transparent. I'm just reporting. I haven't even seen the report yet, but I understand it's recommending that action is likely to take place. So that's just a comment. The thing I would like to consider on the future agenda, and maybe for just a discussion, but not a public report, is what is our interface with the Salinas Valley Basin GSA? I'd just like to get an update of where we are participating or not, what issues perhaps that they have that we ought to be interested in or that we do have an interest in, and just what's the role, what's the participation of the district, if any, and how formal or informal is all that. I'd just like to have a discussion of the relationship of our interests with the GSA interest out of Salinas.
Yeah, we can report on that.
This sounds like a good idea. When we had that discussion earlier about the hydrology and the leakage
Yeah.
to the Salinas, I was wondering if the two GSAs are talking to each other. Does anybody have any idea?
Yeah, so if you read your weekly this weekend
I did not.
and go to the public notices section,
Okay.
which I'm sure everyone does,
Right.
there was a little notice that looked like that. And that's the Salinas Valley Groundwater Basin GSA's notice of public hearing over the fees and charges they want to put into place.
Uh-huh.
But one of the things you'll see there, and it's available on their website as well elsewhere, but the color-coded map shows you the different sub-basins. And it's hard to read, which is why you should probably go to their website. But you'll see where the Seaside Groundwater Basin is, and it's exempted out because it's adjudicated. And then you'll see a little gray area, which is the name they gave it is the Marina Ord area, which is excluded because they've ceded that control to Marina Coast Water District because they had competing applications to be the GSA. And then there's a little yellow area, and that's the Monterey Aquifer that we used to call the Corral de Tierra. And that's where the leakage that Director Riley was referring to happens between the easterly edge of the Seaside Basin and the little piece of the Monterey sub-basin. So we have had a lot of interaction prior to the formation of the Groundwater Sustainability Agency there, but it's a known problem. And so like there's, with Montgomery, one of their consultants, there's been communication between John Lear and one of their people over the destruction of a well. There's been some other, and then John has been involved with their technical advisory committee. So we'll summarize some of that for you. Our interests don't really overlap very much, but you know, they do send us every meeting notice, and so we're usually typically up to speed on what they're doing. But John has had a direct involvement with them. And then there is a public representative who previously, I think, was Janet Brennan with Landwatch. And so she's, you know, intimately well connected with Carmel Valley Association and others here on the peninsula. So we do kind of know what's going on through that channel. But John has had, and I think maybe still currently has, direct communication with their technical advisory committee. So I'll find out and we'll let you know.
I guess to say, I guess I just want to express my interest is that if the GSA, the Salinas Valley GSA, is planning a 20 to 30 year, you're looking 20, 30 years out, And they may be setting some direction for themselves over the next year or so. I don't know what the timing is. Not that they've pinned down every project they want, but at least the category of projects that they think they need. I would like, if they're looking out 20, 30 years, I want us at the table to also look out 20 or 30 years and what our needs may be. And are there some shared interests? And that's kind of my interest, but it's not exactly, you know, an integrated planning process at this point anyway. So
Yeah.
I just want to say that.
Hey, and I'll tell you, they also ran the same ad in Spanish 2 pages later. So they must have a budget.
Well, that's good. That's good. Hey, just one other comment before we close off. Hey, Seaside Basin Committee. I heard John Lur was involved with that replenishing and everything. And then a meeting he didn't show up for, and that's the meeting that they took the vote on. So, or they didn't know what happened to him.
Yes.
As long as we got some staff representing us to keep us informed, you know, I like to keep that going if possible on it, just for me as a director.
Yeah, there may have been some shenanigans involved there. John typically looks at the meeting notices as published on the Watermasters website, and the meeting notice was not posted, so he did not know that meeting was taking place.
Okay, I just want to clear that up because I heard it and they made it seem like, you know, well, we don't know what happened to him and here's the vote.
Yeah.
You know, I think we need to just stay involved as much, somebody needs to follow up. Okay, if anything else. Okay, I guess we can adjourn. Thank you, General Manager, staff,
Thank
thank all of you.
Thank
Council.
you.
thank you.
Thank you all.
All right,
Thank
everybody.
you. Thank you. Bye.
Have a-
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.